folks, today I thought it might be interesting to do a compression test on the Honda Accord now that I've got 120,000 miles on it. Maybe see if there's any signs of problems with the rings or valves, and while we're at it we'll have to remove all the spark plugs, so I'm hoping that this video might be helpful if you're just looking for a spark plug replacement video. Anyway, enough chit chat, let's get to it. So the first thing we'll want to do is pop all these ignition coils out of there. So like I said, I do have 120,000 miles on this now, and I have changed the oil regularly, basically on the maintenance minder. I think it comes up every 8 to 10,000 miles or so, typically, and I have used Mobil 1 synthetic. First vehicle that I've used synthetic on the entire time. Alright, and then each of the ignition coils has a little electrical connector on the back. Just press the tab and the connector comes off. And then the coils just pop out. It's always a good idea when you take these out to look them over, make sure there's no cracks or problems on the shaft of it, and make sure it's free of oil. If there is any oil on it, it's a sign that the seals around the spark plug tubes are leaking. On this vehicle, the seals can't be replaced separately, so you'll have to replace the whole cylinder head cover there. Not a big deal, I think it's $100 or so, but on the older Hondas you used to be able to just replace the seals. And then it's a 14mm wrench for the spark plugs. So get all those loosened up. Just loosen those the rest of the way. Then I'll go grab a magnet and just pull them out. Grab a magnet here. Okay, and then you can just reach in there with a magnet and pull the plugs out. So now one thing to be aware of is that you'll probably need to use an adapter on the end of your compression gauge, and that just threads onto the end of the compression gauge, and so when you screw this in, then when you unscrew it, how do you know which one's going to unscrew? If the compression tester unscrews from the adapter, you could leave the adapter down inside the spark plug tube. So you think that might not be a big deal, but if you look at these adapters, you would think you could just reach down there and stick a socket on that and just unscrew it, but the socket that fits on the adapter doesn't fit into the diameter of the spark plug tube. So if you do get that adapter stuck down in there, then it could be tricky getting out. You might need to use a long pair of needle nose pliers or find some other clever way. If you search on YouTube, then you'll find a lot of people having a bad day with their adapter stuck down in the spark plug tube. So what I did is I just red Loctited the adapter onto the compression tester, and probably could have just used blue, but wanted to be really sure that it wasn't going to come off. So then we can just stick the compression tester down in cylinder 1 and screw it in. Now we don't want the fuel injectors to be firing and flooding the cylinder, so we're going to go over to the fuse box and pull out the fuse and get you set up over there. Let's pop the top off of the fuse box under the hood. And then we're looking for the fuel injector. So it looks like it's injector, it's 20, should be 10, 15, and 20. 10, 15, and a 20. So it's that guy right there. Just double check that. Yeah. 10, 15, and a 20, yep. So again, that'll just keep the fuel injectors from firing so it doesn't flood the engine as we crank it over. I've actually never done a compression test on an engine with push button start, so that'll be interesting too. I'm thinking it'll probably just try for a certain amount of time and then stop cranking at some point if it doesn't start, but we'll see what happens. Okay, hopefully you can see the compression gauge. And I'm going to go crank the engine. So it looks like 195 psi for cylinder number 1. Let's move over to cylinder number 2. Alright, I'm going to go crank it for cylinder number 2. And it does turn out that if you hit the start again, it'll just stop cranking. So that looks like, let's see, about 190, maybe just slightly over 190 for cylinder number 2. Okay, now we'll move on to cylinder number 3. Okay, cylinder number 3 looks like just shy of 200 psi. Okay, and then finally moving on to cylinder number 4. Alright, let's go crank cylinder number 4. Okay, and cylinder number 4 looks like maybe the highest of all of them. Looks like a even 200 psi. So the Honda compression spec is a minimum of 142 psi and a maximum variation between cylinders of 29 psi. So these are what I measured here. So it seems like they're all well above the minimum, and the maximum variability between any two cylinders is about, looks like 7 psi. So I'd say the engine's probably in pretty good shape, at least in that regard. I think there is some debate about whether it's better to do this at cold or at engine hot, and this is all at engine hot. Seems like some people think that you doing it with engine cold might show more problems, but engine hot's more realistic of actual running conditions. So now to put the spark plugs back in, if you do have one of these magnetic sockets, this is one made by Gear Wrench, that's really handy. This is actually a 5/8, so it doesn't fit the spark plugs on this car, so I'll go the old-fashioned route, which is if you have a piece of tubing hanging around, then you can just grab that and get one that fits the diameter of the end of the spark plug, and then you can use that to fish the spark plug in. I do put a touch of anti-seize on the spark plugs. I think there's a lot of debate about whether that's the right thing to do or not. But it is specified in the Honda service data to do that. So that's what I've done, never had a problem with it. So then you can just insert it in, and then you can feel and make sure that the spark plug's going in nice and easy and you're not cross-threading it or anything. And then you can just pull the tube out afterwards. But one thing you don't want to do is just drop the spark plugs in because you could damage the spacing on it, damage the ground electrode. Right in. And spark plug number 4. And then the torque on those is 22 Newton meters on this plugs, that is. The spark plug replacement is definitely a great DIY thing because they charge an arm and a leg at the dealer. I think it was like 430 bucks that they had quoted to do it, and it really is quite a simple job. Okay, so all the spark plugs are torqued, and it's just a matter of putting the ignition coils back in and hooking the electrical connectors back up. And probably there's nobody in the world that would torque these, but if you do want to torque them, then the spec is 12 Newton meters for the bolts on the ignition coils. And then finally, don't forget to put the fuel injector fuse back in so your engine runs again. And that's all there is to it. So I hope you found this video interesting, and thanks for watching. So a keen-eyed observer might have noticed that I said for cylinder number 2 that it was just over 190, and in the results I said 193. When I reviewed the footage of cylinder number 2, I thought maybe I didn't let it crank long enough, so I actually did redo that one, and I got 193 psi for cylinder number 2, and that's what I used in the results I presented earlier. But here's the footage of the redo on cylinder number 2. Okay, this is a repeat of cylinder number 2. So it looks like about 194 maybe.